Peace be upon you and welcome to Way Stations. My name is Rehan Khan and thank you so much for joining today's episode where we're going to be speaking about handmade with our special guest, Mats Abdel Karim Cederberg. But first of all, welcome to my co-host, Dr. Waleed. How are you doing, Dr. Waleed?
I'm doing very well, Rehan. How are you? It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. It always feels like it's been a little bit of a while, and sometimes it has, and sometimes it hasn't. But I think this time it has been a little bit of a while since we both spoke. Yeah, great, excellent. Well, we're very, very excited today because we, both Dr. Waleed and I were on a walk, as some of you know, recently across from Mecca to Medina. And one of the our companions on the walk was Mats Abdel Karim Cederberg, and we had a beautiful time with him. And I'm going to introduce him just now in a moment, but he's someone who I think illuminates every single room that he walks into. A real, has a real sense of humility, and really, mashallah, his manner and his craft at what he does is really amazing. So we're going to hopefully try and bring some of that in an audio setting, because the stuff he does normally he makes by hand, which you can see, but we're going to try and illuminate some of that into this audio setting. So let me introduce him. Mats is a Swedish artist and he studied anthropology and religious studies at the University of Uppsala, and then went on to study Arabic, theology and Hadith studies in Damascus in Syria. He also then learned Islamic calligraphy, and in 2012 he enrolled at the Prince's School of Traditional Arts. I think it's now called the King's School. I think it was a Prince's School then, where he took on classes in ceramics, painting, stained glass, mosaic work, geometry, and several other crafts as well. His works have been exhibited in Sweden, in the UAE, in the UK, and he runs workshops in many locations. Mats, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Welcome.
Very, very lovely to see you. Lovely to see you.
Always lovely to see you too.
Great. Now, you're known very much as an artist and a craftsperson today, in terms of if anyone looks up your Instagram profile or your online profile. But can you maybe just tell us a little bit about your backstory in terms of, some of the formative experiences you've had, your family background, and, maybe how you became Muslim as well?
Okay. So I grew up in a little town in Sweden called Mora. And my parents were teachers there. So there's something called folkhögskola in Swedish, folk high school. And it's a kind of system that is quite Scandinavian. It's from the movements, these movements of education and to educate the people, as just to raise the level of knowledge, not just in terms of degrees, but just for the love of learning. And a lot of art schools in Sweden have this approach, and like crafts, arts, music, especially. And also, my dad was a teacher at this folk high school in Mora, teaching ecology, biology, and these things, because he's a scientist and expert on bumblebees. Among other things, but also a great craftsman. And we had a lot of courses when I was young, like sometimes in the basement or somewhere else, or in the cultural hub in the town, where everybody was sitting and whittling and carving spoons from fresh wood, things like that, with razor sharp knives that also this town is known for, the famous Mora kniv or Mora knife. So things like this made an impression on me, and maybe I took a lot of this for granted. And also, my father was also illustrating his scientific his scientific publications with like very accurate drawings of these insects and solitary bees and things. So, and also when my mother was sitting with a phone, stationary phone at the time, she was always doodling, making calligraphy. And also they always provided me with paints, like good quality good quality watercolors and crayons and things like that. Also folk music. In this area, there's a lot of old folk music, and both my parents are fiddlers as well. So this old tunes that are quite modal in a sense, like they're very, they carry a lot of emotions and expressions. And so there was, I guess, a lot of art when I grew up, but no real connection to, I think, religion. Religion was not something that we ever spoke about, and kind of maybe ridiculed, like the way that the anthropomorphism of Christianity and all of that. So it wasn't really something to take serious. But then later with Islam, or actually starting with the Sufism, so the tradition of tasawwuf in Islam that I came across as a teenager, reading Erik Hermelin. He was a baron from Sweden who was sitting actually in a hospital translating Methnavio, Rumi, and a lot of these things 100 years ago in excellent translations, and Attar and the Conference of the Birds, these kind of things. So I was exposed a little bit to that kind of mysticism, and also I started to feel that there is no contradiction between natural science and that there is another type of reality as well, and spiritual, how do you say, there are different layers of existence or reality. And I always, when somebody asks me about my way to Islam, it's always that I have to think back and decide where shall I start the story. But I think it was this, one thing was the music and Oriental music, and I started to play percussion, and I was interested in music from the Middle East, so because very complex and interesting, and also Islamic patterns that I came across and found that there's it felt like it had a lot of meaning, and a meaning that I could not quite understand and grasp, and that all of these patterns were somehow keys to another layer of reality, or like keys to the universe.
Right. So what was the point there where you kind of, because you've obviously come from a background where traditional arts were honored, but in your own journey, what was the point where you actually said, well, this is what I'm gonna do? Because it's very unusual for people to say they're going to make a career in traditional arts, and it's also very difficult to actually make a living in that way. But at what point did you make that your mind up? And what was that, just a natural thing, or was there a set of trigger events that led you there?
I think it's not that I chose a path like this is my career now. I mean, because I've always try to learn new things and keep the kind of the spark, to learn new skills, and so it's not like I have a very clear degree, and even with arts, it's different techniques. Yeah, a lot of different things, I would say. So I had a strong pull that I wanted to learn percussion and like the darbuka and def and these instruments. So I traveled to Turkey and to meet somebody that I had met in Sweden, and stayed there for a while in Istanbul. And also while I was there, I was exposed to this magnificent architecture of the Islamic civilization. And a lot of times it's like an artwork. If you go into a mosque of Mimar Sinan, it's like an art installation. And with art, you want to express something that words cannot really express. Like Yusuf Islam said, you can argue with a philosopher, but you can't argue with a good song. And this kind of non-verbal communication is very important. And that art is not like in in our religion, in Islam, art is not just something superficial that you put on afterwards, or like the beauty is just some additional thing, but it's something that is integral. There's something that's fundamental, and that we have to do everything with ihsan, with beauty. So when I went into the Blue Mosque, I was very affected by it. Just the aesthetics of entering into this place and the way that everything is arranged with the domes and with the proportions and the balance between the horizontal and the vertical, and when you're going up the steps, it prepares you for something, and the expansion and contraction when it just opens up. And this is the type of language, and it spoke to my soul, because I just felt that I wanted to pray when I came in there.
But you weren't Muslim. You weren't Muslim.
No, I wasn't Muslim. I didn't have a religious tradition at all. But I just felt that, oh, what do I do now? I should take off my shoes, wash myself, and pray, isn't it? It took a while for me to kind of identify as Muslim. Most importantly for me, I thought that God knows what's in my heart, and that's the important thing. Like this is my journey to know God. And in the beginning, I couldn't relate to the word God itself, because it was so heavy, like this so heavy connotation with certain Christian, like anthropomorphism, that a lot of people in the West, in Europe, if they're asked, do you believe in God? They would say that, no, I don't believe in a guy sitting up in the sky, or like an old man with a beard as it's depicted. So this is something that turns people away from this, because this is not real. I lost my thread a little bit. Where were we?
No, you were talking about the Blue Mosque. I think I kind of diverted you a little bit. The fact that you went into the Blue Mosque, you wanted to pray, and it was the place had a language without speaking.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that there is both the skill of like this art. Art is art and craft were traditionally the same thing, and it's to craft something with both your mind and heart and hand, and it's connected, like your whole being, and you're tuned in, and there is a skill to it, that there is a craft that you can learn, but there is also something unseen about it, like with the intentions, for example, the spirituality, the kind of presence of heart that you have, that maybe it cannot directly be analyzed, but it's something that can seep through. And I think that a lot of Islamic art joins between these two. We shouldn't disregard the technique and the skills, and also we shouldn't disregard the actual, the intention, what it's for. So we need both of these streams to guide us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Abdel Karim. While you were speaking, you mentioned anthropomorphism a couple of times, and you also mentioned that when you went into the Blue Mosque, and I'm trying to tie the threads together, and then the fact that you're a craftsman. All of these, I think the common thread between that is there's a kind of a high level of symbolism and representation. As you said, when you enter the Blue Mosque, it's a language, right? It's speaking to you. And it's not making an argument. It's kind of, it is the argument, right? That's why you can't argue with it. It's showing itself. And that comes out in art. And if you look at the ethos, I think maybe the common thread in all Islamic art, that the common value or message is a celebration of God, right? So when you walked into the Blue Mosque, you felt like this is celebrating something bigger than me, and it's not some big man in the sky, and it's more than that. So I was wondering how you view that in terms of the art in general, and maybe the art that you do, relating it back to that idea of a symbolism, representation, or celebration of the divine, as it were.
Yeah, so that's what I also want to do with my art, that I want to both that the actual practice, the design and the carving is a type of worship, and it's a type of something that is good for my spirituality, and that it elevates me, but also that it should elevate somebody who is experiencing it. If it's a mihrab or a crafted object or something, that it's it's exploring the proportions and the way that God created the cosmos. And in geometry, for example, geometry is number in space and proportions in space, and music is numbers and proportion in time. Whether it's a beat, a rhythm, or a pitch, it's like the different frequencies, and the proportions with these different frequencies convey different states and affects our souls in different ways. And we can see that around us, that in a sense everything is praising God if we have the heart to see it.
Yeah.
That's interesting you said that, because the Prophet ﷺ was known to name his things, and then some of the things he used to name were his bows too, his swords. So it says almost, I don't want to say they were ensouled or had a soul in them, but kind of, in the sense that he magnified it, or he signified it by giving it a name. And then you give something a name, you establish a relationship with it, and maybe it's your partner in worship, right? To some degree. So I don't know. Do you get that kind of feeling when you're in your workshop and you're making these things, that you have a partner that's doing this with you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and that's a very important point, I think. And I think it's a different time, and we see also other peoples, like in the Viking Age, they would also name their things, swords or boats or whatever. But in our age, things are like everything is secularized and material, and we just think of things as units and inanimate. But I think, for example, if we're working with something that is alive, like now, the scientists discover that the trees can speak to each other, things that Ibn Arabi spoke about 1,000 years ago. But now they know that there are signals going from tree to tree. I mean, they're both chemical, but also some kind of electrical, and they hook up with the web of mycelium, of mushrooms in the soil, in the earth, and things like this. So it's something that is alive, but maybe we don't always understand how other things are alive. And then if I'm working on if I'm harvesting a tree, for example, and I split it, as opposed to just milling it, running it through the sawmill, but I'm splitting it so it follows the fibers of the wood, then it's more of a conversation with the wood. And then from that stave, I'm convincing it to be a bow, like rather than just a stick. And I have to work with it, not just impose on it. And there's only so much that you can. For example, if you're bending it and you're making a bow, you really have to. It's not just about measurements. It's about seeing how well it responds, and back and forth, working with it.
Yeah.
So I think this kind of connection with the materials is something that we humans have been using for millennia. As long as using wood, using stone, using ceramics. I think people are kind of becoming more and more distant with it. Like if you're just using a machine instead, like a computer, it's somehow removed from this, like the thing that I said about mind and heart and hand. Like now there's some kind of separation there, and even more so with machines taking over now with AI and all of this. So I think there's a big difference between a machine and a tool. That a tool is an extension of yourself, but a machine is something that kind of takes over.
It's like a mediation layer, right? So the experience is being mediated through something which is different. One thing I wanted to ask you a little bit here, which is because you're known for making door frames and bows and knives and arrows and guitars and many different instruments as well, which are extremely beautiful.
I haven't really made guitars, but
you have made a guitar, so okay, well maybe inshallah one day.
Yeah, maybe.
So one of the things that when you talk to artists, they say that what takes them a long time to figure out is the process of doing the art, whether it's poetry or writing or woodwork or metalwork. And generally, people say sometimes it can take you about 10 years until you really, know it well, up to a certain level. So when you begin with a piece of wood, can you just talk us through your process? Like what's your process that you go through to take that raw piece of wood and then make something of it? And I don't mean just the physical process. Is there some other preparation that you might be doing, and at a more metaphysical level, or something that so that what you produce, it's not just the outcome, but it's actually the process as well, that you're focusing on the process so you get the right outcome?
So there are different approaches to this. Like now, if I'm designing something with specific proportions, then maybe I will just design it first and then go to the timber yard, to get the planks and plane them and put them together and all of that. But if it's something crafted, like there's another kind of approach. If for example, if you're going out in the woods and you read the wood, you see that one trunk is growing in a specific way, then you would know that this would be perfect for this kind of sofa, or this would be perfect for a ship, or for the shipbuilders. Or if you have this, for example, the Sami people in the north of Sweden, they don't have a lot of fancy wood like you have more variety in tropical climate, of course, but there you have spruce, birch, and pine. Basically, a few more, of course, but then they would know that if there's a tree trunk that's growing in a slope, for example, a spruce, that's normally quite soft wood, but if it grows in a slope that you have to push to come around, then that wood has specific properties that can be used in a specific way. And so, but this is very hard to do like industrially. So now, like when the forest company, what do you call it? Like the wood companies, they just chop everything down and they don't really differentiate. So when things become very big and industrialized, you lose this connection. But it's something that I would do, especially when working with small pieces like ladles and spoons, and then that there is a curve on that piece, then it would be perfect for a specific thing. One can also, of course, steam bend wood, to get a certain shape. You steam it for an hour or so, and then it becomes malleable, so you can bend it and put it in a shape and let it cool down, and it would take that shape. So there are different approaches, depending on what you're working on.
Yeah.
And what type of wood. But I think it's generally, when you're working with wood, then you start to see that it's not just about. It's like every wood has its own personality, and specific fragrance, density, toughness. Yeah, I think that's very, very interesting.
Yeah. So then, I mean, some of the stuff that you make is, traditional hunting equipment, which needs to be rugged, it needs to be precise. How do you balance that? Because the stuff you make is very beautiful as well. So how do you balance that aesthetic beauty with functionality?
So I think that with bows is definitely functionality first.
Right.
For example, if you steam bend the tips, that is something for to improve the performance of the bow. And people have been trying to to develop these designs for millennia, and then you don't want any extra mass. So maybe if there's a designer who has no idea about archery, want to make something beautiful and just putting a lot of strange ornaments, that makes no sense if you know about archery. So you want no extra mass at all, especially towards the tips. So it's like just enough so that it doesn't break, but also that it's light and durable enough. Someone can strengthen it in different ways with horn and with sinew and so on. And then also to protect it, one could wrap, for example, very, very thin layers of birch bark or thin rawhide or something. And then, of course, one can decorate it with painting or a stain or So I think functionality comes first.
Yep. Right.
In that case.
Yeah.
But then also there is of course, when you're working with that design and you're relating it to your body, if there's a knife handle, for example, a lot of times when you find what fits nice and there is a beauty that comes through that.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if that's
no, for sure. One thing I wanted to just move on a little bit was also how maybe some of how traditional crafts can illuminate lessons that we can learn for life as well. So for example, when you work on a piece of wood, there are knots, there are cracks, there are unpredictable grains, there are imperfections in the wood, right? And suddenly you're having to deal with this imperfection that you didn't know about. How does that perhaps resonate with unexpected things that happen in your life? I mean, have there been things that you've been working on in your workshop, and then you thought, this is just like that situation that happened in my life, that you can draw parallels from?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there is some for a woodworker, sometimes they want to have like very straight grain and very uniform. But then some woods would have even genetic defects, so that they're all like deformed or something. Sometimes there's a knot coming out, and the grain is all very messy and things. And for some users, that's the most important thing, and very highly valued. And like you have curly birch, for example, which is a type of birch, and that grain is much more interesting than just a very plain one, and but that comes from a genetic defect, on the birch, and that's now very, very pricey, to get, and that's what you want to use for like a knife handle or something like that. So I think it's to appreciate that. Also with people, that we're all different, and that's the beauty of it. And also like in one's life, that sometimes things are smooth and sometimes it's rough, and all we can do is to have good good etiquette to God, like along the road. Like we cannot really change where the road itself, but we can change our attitude.
Yeah. Dr. Willie?
The imperfections, I think, that you're referring to, when you're contending with the wood and you have to kind of fashion it into something, kind of reminds me like a correlation to this concept I think we've discussed in the podcast before about tarbiyah. And tarbiyah, as you know, means, if it's your own soul or your own ego, it's fashioning it and refining it into something, I don't know how to say, more usable, but more amenable to humanity. Yeah, taking... Yeah. Even the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that people are like gold and silver mines, that the best of them before Islam will be the best of them and after Islam. In other words, the best of them before they were refined, right before gold and silver is refined, if it's a good piece, it's going to be, when it's fashioned into something like a piece of jewelry or something, or a coin, then it's even going to be that much better. So maybe, when you take that wood and then you fashion it into something. Notwithstanding, I was thinking also about the Rumi reed flute poem when you were talking about cutting the wood and how it's lamenting leaving the pond where it was, and now it's a flute, and is it ever going to go back, and that sort of thing. So more kind of this idea of it's a living thing, right? And you're fashioning it into something, and you're giving it a kind of a new life, right? Something else that it's doing with its life, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, and when you start doing this and you start fashioning it, are you already seeing where it's going, or are you kind of handling it as it goes along, and then you might change course or do something different? Or
sometimes maybe one could change course, but sometimes you see it from the beginning. And one of my teachers, Jogge Sundqvist, he's a craftsman in Sweden. He said that he was looking for a specific type of birch that grows like an S, because he wanted to make a sofa that it's called a Souther's sofa, like that you can sit, like one person sits looking in one direction and one in the other,
like an S shape. Yes.
Yeah. So he was driving his snow scooter around in northern Sweden, like looking for that kind of tree, and it was like giving up. And then he saw it, and he said it was like a revelation. Like, he's not religious at all, but when he saw it, he was just like overwhelmed and asked the tree, like, "Do you want to become a sofa for an exhibition in Stockholm?" And so I think, even though, like, for an artist or a craftsperson, even though there is no formal religion or formal kind of spirituality, even though if one is identifying as an materialist, atheist, I think the art has something that you can feel is beyond, that reaches beyond that, and that there is a spirituality to it.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we have a language for it, so we can cultivate that.
In terms of this kind of process that you're going through, and as you're working on your pieces, and sometimes you make mistakes and you get things wrong, which obviously naturally happens in any kind of craft, and sometimes it's a case of you've got to slow down to sort of speed up. But what has that taught you about I guess just things like ego and humility, and what can you learn from a craft about those kind of aspects of human behavior?
Like, I think one thing is I wanted to say about the refinement, that there is a correlation between, like, refining this piece and the refinement of yourself. That first it's rugged and raw, and then you take the scrub plane, for example, and then a finer plane, and then you get this silky smooth surface in the end. But you can still feel where it came from, this kind of mind, the material that you started off with, but the refinement that brings it out. I think that's what Islam does and should do, is that to bring out the beauty in everyone, the beauty, the thing that is inherent in all of us, and that it's fine if that's different, and everybody's unique, and that it's not like that you put everyone through like in a mold, to make one the same, but it's like to cultivate and to bring out the potential.
Yeah. Dr. Walid, you obviously deal with a lot of people as well in terms of your classes and your teaching and your scholarship. And do you find there's a similar kind of pattern to that? Sometimes you have students who are really kind of rough around the edges, but there's gold there, but it just takes a bit of time to kind of, see that polish come through. I mean, what kind of, are there any interesting stories that you can?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone has some gold in them. I think no one is without that. But then I think the challenge is much like what Abdel Karim was talking about, is, okay, I have this piece of birch or oak or whatever it might be, and what's specific to this particular piece, right? Because I think that's where people get into trouble when we try to cookie cutter or kind of treat everybody the same and then expect similar results. But everybody has their own, let's say, ability and tendency and adaptability to things, and that's why you got to treat every single person as an individual. And what works for one person may not work for another. That's in the same way that they all look like trees and they all look like birchwood, but at the end of the day, they're not all the same. And this one may make a fine bow, and this one may make a fine piece of furniture, and this one make a fine sword handle or whatever it might be. And so I think dealing with people, it's important to let everybody know that they do have their niche and their potential and where they're going to go with it and that sort of thing. And I think, I was thinking many of the ulama, they themselves either were craftsmen or they had some hand in some of these sorts of arts and, even archery, not just making bows, but the practice of archery also has a lot of suluk elements, a lot of kind of character refinement elements within them, and horse riding, and from my experience also very much so. So it's like you train the horse, but the horse also trains you. So it kind of goes both ways in terms of the refinement of character. So, and I think like what Sidi Abdel Karim was saying, the modern world is missing that. And what you mentioned, we have this level of mediation or this layer of simulation between us and experiencing real life. And as a result, we miss the the bumps and the bruises and the rub and look at the modern education system or the university. We use vocabulary like safe space, trigger warnings, things like that, because people don't want to go in the place where there might be some friction or some tension. But for a craftsperson, like that's where everything happens. That's where the magic happens, right? When you apply friction, or you apply tension, or the bow when you string it. That's the whole thing, is the tension in it. And I think people miss out on that part of life in a big way because we've made it just so innocuous and we've I don't know, made it so soft and easy to the degree that people don't have the preparedness or the readiness even to take on what not really is adversity, but it's something that even slightly puts them out of their comfort zone. And I think obviously working with raw materials, whether it be metal or stone or wood, or there's a lot of patience involved in that, and it's painstaking, and you have to work diligently and gradually, and you can't rush it, and that's a metaphor for life. Whereas we have these machines do it now, and now we have AI, right? The thing that would have taken you a week to research or figure out, the AI does a few in seconds. And while that's not unuseful, it's useful, I guess, to a degree, but I think we miss out the tarbiyah aspect, the refining of character and soul aspect is what I think is the great fear here. And the price, for expediency and ease, but we lose who we are. And that's why I think what Abdel Karim is doing and others like him, these things can't be allowed to die. They have to continue, and people have to continue to practice it and pass it on. Which brings us, I think, to the other question we wanted to ask you. You were apprentice for a long time, and now I think you're a master craftsman. So do you actually train other people, and do you have students, and what does that look like, and what's the process and so forth?
I had a reflection before I forget it. We were walking together in the desert and we arrived in Medina, alhamdulillah, and this is so beautiful, such a beautiful place, mashallah. But there is a difference there. Like you see, some of the mosques are done with machined, that you can really tell that they have so many columns. They're exactly the same. The ornaments are exactly the same. It's just done in a computer. I will come to your question later, but I just wanted to say this. And there's another few other mosques, Quba and Haramain, that are done with craftsmen. You have actual craftsmen. They come and they do it. maybe it's not that super polished finish in the end. It's that, but it has more soul, and it has more like you can kind of trace the process of it. And we were speaking about tarbiyah, about refinement, both in character and in education. And I think that sometimes there's some kind of roughness as well, or that it's tactile, that you feel the traces of that. Something is happening here.
Mm.
You know, sometimes you build the log houses in my region of Sweden, for example. They hew the logs, and they wouldn't plane the plane is super fine in the end, but it, like, you see the cuts of the axe, the chop, you can feel that, and still, if you have a razor sharp edge, there's still like refinement, but it's also in like a bit rough. But there is this tactile and very soothing kind of surface there as well. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, that parallel.
Mm.
But then, you know, the thing of master, and I think I'm in too many different disciplines at the same time. So like, I wouldn't call myself a master.
Well, no master would call themselves a master. So
at the time, yeah. Okay. Can you repeat the question again?
Do you have any students? Are you training anybody in any of the things that you do, in any of the crafts work that you do?
I have some kids that I've been teaching them, you know, on back and forth a bit of wood turning, you know, ladling. There was whittling, you know, carving, you know, doing some basic carpentry, you know, and coming back, you know, teaching them. Not quite as an apprentice, but still, I think it's important for all of us to do some of these crafts. Maybe not, like, we don't have to do all the crafts, but if we like, even Sultan Abdul Hamid, you know, the Ottoman Caliph, he had a workshop where he was doing fine carpentry as well. So and I think that even though one doesn't become a professional artist or professional wood turner, or this, it's still good to have an understanding of the different crafts. You know, it teaches you something, but it also teaches to appreciate the crafts. And even in classical Islamic times, they would appreciate farmers, and they would have, here or in Andalusia, they would have books written about how noble it is to be a farmer. You know, this, like, the spiritual aspects of farming. But now, if you say to somebody now, you call them a farmer, it's an insult. Like, it's something low, like to use one's hands. And so I think it's important to bring all of these aspects together.
Yeah.
So I mostly do short courses and workshops that, you know, like a introduction to this thing at this moment, but maybe like later.
Yeah. And one thing that we, I think, you know, certainly Dr. Walid and I have spoken about in the past with regards when you're doing your craft, or when you're doing something with excellence, then, you know, you sometimes get into this kind of flow state whereby you're really there, you're very, very present, right? How does that work for you? I mean, how do you get yourself into that flow state? And then do you feel like, you know, you're like almost like a conduit for something, or, you know, how's that experience for you?
I think it sometimes a lot of people would think that, oh, I have to be inspired when I work, and but sometimes it's just like you just show up for, like they say, for the gym, you show up, you have this constancy with the prayers as well. Like we pray 5 times a day, and maybe not all of them like you feel very spiritual. Maybe one you feel like very in tune with everything, and another time is one is more stressed and can't really keep some thoughts out, but you still show up for it. So it's so I think in order to get that flow state, you need discipline as well. You need to sit down with it. If it's drawing, or you go to the workshop and you do it, and then sometimes you find yourself in that flow state where things just land, and they you feel like you said, a conduit, that there is something coming through you, that it just comes out right. More like Coltrane, he said, play in tune with the universe. So I think that's what we should strive for, that, and we should have that as an ideal, but also that we're not kind of put off, or that we quit if we don't feel that flow state immediately.
Yeah. And I think that's actually interesting, because showing up is really important. And this is when people ask me about the writing process. I say it's not a question of whether you feel like it or not. If you say you're a writer, you just have to do it, and maybe the feeling will come later. But you have to get into it. You have to make the effort. And I think sometimes, when you make things too clinical and too easy for everyone, then they don't want to struggle. Getting over that first bump, or that jumping that first hurdle, becomes so insurmountable that they don't try. And I'm not feeling it today. Well, it's not really a question of feeling. You just have to keep on doing it, and maybe you'll get that feeling as you get there. So that's actually quite important, I think. And Dr. Willie, maybe I can just bring you in here to ask you about, because Mats mentioned this piece about prayer, and sometimes you're not quite always there, but maybe sometimes you will. Maybe could you just maybe elaborate on that a little bit, because that is something I think people do struggle with sometimes when it comes to, say, prayer or religious obligations, where they're not always feeling it, and sometimes they think, oh, well, I'm not really up to it, I don't feel like it today, I'm not going to do it. I mean, what advice would you give them in
Well, I think it's very similar to what you just said. I mean, I think we have such a focus on how we feel about things, as if that's the barometer or the criteria by which something is worthwhile doing or not. So, but your feelings come from a myriad of sources, and they don't always have your best interest at heart, and they could be a reaction to something that's temporary or fleeting, and not really indicative of what you should be doing in this particular part of your life, or the day, or month, or week, or so forth. So that's why this idea of consistency and establishing routines, and as you said, writers, craftspeople, what does religion mean when you say you do something religiously? It means like you do it really if you feel like it or you don't feel like it. And it's something that you work into your life, and I'm sure as a writer, as a craftsperson, or as anyone who's has a particular skill set and they're trying to put something out there for the world to benefit from, there'll be days where like it feels flow and great, and there'll be other days you're going to struggle. And I think that's part of the overall experience. Even with religious devotion, there'll be days where it's very easy and light and goes smoothly, and then there'll be days where it's a bit of a struggle. But I always say to people, God likes to be worshipped in the sunshine and in the rain. So it's not just about like when people follow a particular sports team, you're a sunshine fan. It means only when you win the Premier League, then you're going to be interested in that particular team. So no, you have to be consistent, and I think continuity and consistency are undervalued in our culture to a great degree, and with the theoretical idea of creativity and innovation taking their place, as if the thing that's novel and new is necessarily better just by virtue that it's new, or that it's a departure from something that came before. But that's not actually the case. I think people do need continuity and consistency, and that's when they start to do novel things, right? When you're practicing a craft and you're doing it, whether it's the prayer, and and some of the ulama refer to religious devotion as a sana'ah, as a type of craft, and to have that kind of attitude when you're doing it, because you're building towards something, right? And people need meaning in their life, and they need to feel like they're pursuing something. Otherwise, life doesn't really have a lot of enjoyment to it. Like if you're just kind of existing and doing the same thing day in and day out without kind of a goal in mind or an objective or working towards something, then I think it becomes quite unbearable, actually. And hence, people who are in certain fields or jobs that just feel like they're existing and they're a cog in the wheel, they're not building towards something, are often plagued with this sort of feeling. So I always encourage people to, your job is not your life. And if you have a craft or you have something of an athletic nature that you're building towards, or, you got to have something, that goes just beyond the meaning of hobby, but something that's, I think, and even better if it can benefit others and you bring something forth and that sort of thing. So I really admire people like Sayyid Abdel Karim and yourself and others who every day you're doing a little piece of that, right? You're putting a piece of the puzzle in, and then eventually when it's done, you show us the puzzle, and and we all benefit from it.
Well, we hope so.
And it's also said that, like, now a lot of people look up to artists and think, oh, an artist is a special type of person. But I think back in the day, you regarded everyone as a specific type of artist. Everyone was a special type of artist. And also the thing you said about novelty, that now tradition is seen as something like backwards, but it's like to bring something from before, like, into the present, and that it's connected, and that it doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be like a relic, that it's something just copying something from the past, but it's taking it like a river flows. It's the same river, but it take a different turn maybe, and carries on. And we're speaking about the Ottoman mosques before, and they're continuing the tradition of the Byzantine Church. Like they had the Hagia Sophia as a model, and then they continued that tradition. They continued with that dome that represents the celestial sphere and all of that language, but they didn't just replicate it. They took it further, and they tried to elevate it even more. So it is the same tradition, but it continues.
Yeah, and I think if you look at some of the greatest artists, the first thing they did was they tried to imitate the best. And once you get to a certain level of proficiency in being able to imitate, then you start to create your own style, So I think that's definitely something.
And it inevitably is going to have an imprint from your soul on it.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be draped, and like you are good with words. I'm not, but the words are like draped in the states of your hal and your spiritual state, right? And sometimes you could really feel that in some people. And also the arts and the craft, it's, it has that, it conveys something of that person's state.
Yeah. So can I ask one last question for me, I think, as we start to sort of draw things to a close, which is about your work in terms of some of the stuff that you do is around, frames and doorways and so on, almost like transitions between places. It almost feels like you're transitioning from one state to another state, or one realm to another realm. So when you look at that and you look at it from the perspective of a sacred space, could you just talk to us a little bit about that in terms of transitioning almost again, from one place to another place, and also sacred spaces? How do you see your work as a craftsperson in terms of creating that space or that sacred space?
That's what I'm working on right now, a portal or a niche, a mihrab. And I think that is that you have to relate to it and like to feel it. That if you, for example, sometimes I've drawn things full scale on the wall, like with a huge compass, and so that it's the same measurements as that you relate to it with your body, and that one should be able to also to feel and perceive, like, how does this feel here, and not just these things really can get lost in, like, if you just do it in a computer. Like now, like there's some obvious example where things are just out of scale and out of proportion, just because it's done in AutoCAD, from the start. So I think that's important. Like also, to imitate and to learn a craft, but also to allow yourself to feel. Like, how do I feel in this space? How can this be a transition? Like you can have theoretical knowledge of this is what this symbolizes and this is what this means, but also that you feel, does it really symbolize this? Is this the effect that it has on me? Or maybe this pattern that I'm designing is intellectually or like artistically very interesting, but maybe it gives people this feeling that I'm not after, or like so there is this, one have to be to listen and to stop and feel, stop and listen to it and feel what it expresses.
Yeah. No, great. So, Mats, I'm going to ask you for a book recommendation in just a moment. But before I do, Dr. Waleed, is there any kind of last comments you want to make on this topic of, handcraft or handmade?
No, I appreciate the perspective that Mats Abdel Karim brought. And I think it's a theme that we've touched upon in other podcasts, not just for the utility of such endeavors, but as we said, the spiritual aspects, and I think things which can only be appreciated if you actually try them out and do them and make an attempt at them, and then you have to actually spend quite a bit of time working at it. And we live in the instant gratification era of I want it now and I want it in this particular way and expediency, and hence we have the intermediary of machines increasingly, and being that barrier between us and really lived experience. And I'm glad that Abdel Karim was able to give us, give more proof, so to speak, of that it's important to get around that and start experiencing life on your own. And I look forward that we can have other people come on and take different perspectives, people in different sorts of arts and even athletics and other things that I think will be AI proof, at least for the time being. And you mentioned earlier, Abdel Karim, about farmers, and AI can be involved in farming, but the idea of the person planting the seed and the type of reliance that they have to have, because you don't know what your crop is going to turn out like, and so these things were kind of built into people's lifestyles. Now we have to go searching, and people ask questions in forums, and like, how do I be more reliant on God, and what can I do to do that? And a lot of these things were already built in. How do I cope with adversity and setbacks? Well, if you're a craftsperson and you make a mistake in your thing, and it's like a couple of weeks of labor, and then you have to redo it, then you learn to, you develop this resiliency. And I think that's what's missing because of this kind of artificial separation that we have between ourselves and life. So the more that we can kind of reattach ourselves and regain that, I think the better people will be, the better human beings. And I think these are the things people are not talking about. Everybody's on the technological kind of arc and ladder, but what effect does it have on our humanity? I think it becomes a very secondary, tertiary question. So thank you so much, and
thank you very much.
No, it's great.
Honored to be here with you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well, so I think just to summarize from my side, I guess, one of the things that all of this stuff does, I do feel that when you do engage in an art and a craft, there is a certain dignity that comes through it. And that's the fact that you have to struggle to do it, and it builds you as a character. So I think it's something which is character building. You may not, no one may even know about the piece of craftsmanship that you've done, or the wood that you've made, or the tile work that you've made. No one will ever know about it, perhaps, but it still made you into something. So while you're making it is also making you. And I think from that comes a sense of dignity as well. So, So anyway, so it was great. It was really, really great to have you on the show, Mats. I kind of learned a lot as well about craftsmanship as well. I really appreciated that. But I'm not going to let you get away without recommending a book. So we always ask everyone to give a book recommendation. So we'd like to give you, what book have you got to recommend for us?
Oh, I have one book for you here, and it's a book that that the school put out. Now the King's Foundation.
Yes,
it was the Prince's School of Traditional Arts. So it's called Arts and Crafts of the Islamic Lands: Principles, Materials, Practice.
Right.
And one could also search for Khaled Azzam. So he is the head teacher and the director of the school, and it has some introduction. I mean, like the introduction of geometry, what it's all about, or is fourness, sixness, fiveness, golden mean ratio, grids, proportions in nature, and then it has some step by step, how to make triangular grid, how to make square grid, and all of these things from scratch, and a lot of examples, different patterns from different parts of the world, and then it goes into different crafts as well. Some carving in gesso, preparing material, pigments and dyes and things like that. So it's quite like an overview of a lot of things.
Great. So it's called The Arts and Crafts of the Islamic Lands.
That's right.
And it was by the authors again?
Khaled Azzam.
Khaled Azzam, and it's published by the Prince's Trust, or what's called now the King's Estate.
Yeah, Thames and Hudson.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds like...
send you a link, yeah.
Okay,
yeah, it's
like
quite
a good book as an entry level. It's probably quite an advanced book, but anyway, it sounds like a good book to...
I think there's always something that you can...
Yeah.
A lot of things that you can take from it.
Great. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much. Dr. Walid, any book recommendations this week from you on the topic?
I think we'll suffice with what Abdel Karim recommended.
Okay. I've got one which actually interestingly is a book on economics, which might seem a bit strange, but I'm going to recommend a book called Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher. It's a book that was written in the 1970s, Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher. And it's really a critique of the kind of doctrine of economic, technological, and scientific specialization that took place in the West and the whole industrialization process. And he's talking very much about the fact that we should go back to smaller working units, more crafts and more guilds and so on, because that is more humanizing. Whereas the other approach of industrialization is very dehumanizing. So it's an economic argument for how can we help to humanize people through smaller working units, through more craft, through more communal ownership and so on. So I thought it would be an interesting book if anyone's interested in the topic with a economic agenda of how to do it. So slightly related, I think, but it's a book I read certainly a long time ago, and it's stuck with me since then. So Mats Abdel Karim, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure
Barakallahu fikum. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Walid.
Thank you, Abdel Karim.
Thank you once again.
Thank you.
I hope I get to see you in person soon.
Inshallah. I look forward to it.
We hope so. All right. Thank you. And thank you very much to all our listeners for tuning in to listen to the show this week. And we look forward to welcoming you back on a future episode.